The silent tenant. The letter stayed in the kitchen, unobtrusive but misplaced. The edges were yellow with age, as if it had been stashed away for years, even decades, although Emma had no recollection of ever having seen it before. She had found it the day before, wedged under her front door, with no stamp, no address, only hers in wobbly, uneven handwriting. The handwriting seemed in a rush, frantic, and it repulsed her. She hesitated, her hand poised above the paper, then broke the seal at last. There was one sheet, folded over, with 2 lines written in the same wobbly handwriting. I have lived in your attic for months now. You sleep soundly. Emma caught her breath in her throat. The words pounded in front of her, every letter gouging her brain like a sliver. She read them again, hoping she had read them incorrectly, but the letter remained, stark as it could be. Her home, a modest 2-story cottage on the outskirts of town, had always been her refuge. Quiet. Hers. The thought of someone, something, living overhead, watching her, was ridiculous. And yet the letter sat in her hands, its heaviness undeniable. She gazed upwards at the ceiling, where the trapdoor to the attic lay hidden within the hallway. It was an old 1920s home, with creaking floors and the smell of damp pervading the edges. The attic was one she didn't frequently think about, a small, dusty area cluttered with stacks of long-forgotten items. It had been months, perhaps even a full year, since she'd even entered it. The thought of someone in the attic, moving stealthily while she remained below, twisted her gut. Emma put the letter back down and strolled through the kitchen in her bare feet, the cold tile feeling against them. It had to be a prank. Maybe the neighbor boy, Tim, thought it would be funny to scare her. He constantly hung around, leaving plastic spiders on her porch. But the handwriting didn't appear to be from someone who acted like a kid. It was too deliberate, too precise. She considered calling the police, but what could she report? Someone sent me an odd note? They'd think she was being dramatic. The day passed in a haze of expectation. Emma tried to keep herself busy with chores, did dishes, did laundry, but her eyes drifted to the ceiling. Every creaking of the house, every knock against the windows, sounded like an occupant. By evening, she couldn't stand it anymore. She grabbed the flashlight and the broom, the closest she had to a weapon, and walked to the hallway. It was a square section of the ceiling board, its edges yellow with age. Attached to it was the pull string, swaying back and forth, even in the absence of breeze. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she lifted the cord with her fingers. Her finger feeling the rough rope, she paused. What if someone had waited in hiding above? What if the letter had been genuine? She shook her head, reproaching herself with foolishness. It was her own house. She had the right to probe. The trapdoor creaked as it swung open, giving way to a square opening above her. Dust drifted down, floating in the beam from her flashlight. The rickety ladder stretched itself behind her, the hinges squealing as it expanded. Emma climbed, her hands shaking, broom held under one arm. The attic smelled of mildew and old wood, the air thick, close to stifling. Her flashlight pierced the room, showing piles of cardboard boxes, the broken mirror leaning against the wall, and the piles of moth-eaten blankets. Everything seemed to be in its proper position. She stepped across the attic floor, the creaking beneath her. The beam danced in and out of the darkness, searching for the misplaced. She heard the faint scratching in the corner stopped. Mice, she told herself. Only mice. She took one step closer, the beam spotting the little pile of papers she had thought were hidden from view behind the box. She knelt, her heart racing to gather them. Receipts, grocery lists, pieces of paper, all hers, things she had thrown away months ago. Why here? Then she saw it, a small, crumpled blanket in the corner, the shape of a nest. Beside it, one shoe, one man's shoe, filthy, worn. Her heart came to a halt. She did not own any men's shoes. She took one step back, her flashlight shaking, and her foot collided with something hard. She leaned down to see. There was one spoon, the handle bent, rusty, lying on the ground. Beside it lay a piece of material, torn from one of her own blouses. Emma's legs did weaken. She staggered towards the ladder, her brain screaming at her to get away. She reached the trapdoor, the sound halting her, a soft, deliberate creak, one step onto the floor in the attic behind her. She turned around, her flashlight cutting through the darkness, but no one was behind her. There were only boxes, blackness, and a repugnant nest in the corner. She fell from the ladder, shutting the trapdoor behind her. She shook as she pushed a kitchen chair in beneath the handle. It would only keep her safe momentarily, but it improved her mood to some degree. She extracted her phone from her pocket and dialed her friend Sarah, her voice shaking as she revealed the letter, the attic, the nest. Sarah promised to come over early the next morning, but it was already evening, and Emma didn't want to be alone. She could not sleep that evening. She remained in the bed, staring at the ceiling, the words from the letter echoing in her mind. You sleep soundly. Had they watched her? Heard her breathing? The house was still, but she could feel it as if it were alive, as if the walls waited with held breath. She gripped the broom in her hand, her eyes fixed on the door to the room. A sound cut through the darkness at midnight, a muffled thud from the roof. Emma's heart missed a beat. Another thud, followed by the creaking groan, something massive being dragged across the attic floor. She hugged the blankets to herself, her breathing coming in shallow gasps. The noises stopped, but the silence had been worse. The house appeared to hold its breath. They didn't sleep. Sarah came early in the morning, looking green as she let Emma show her the letter and introduce her to the attic. They climbed the ladder, with Sarah holding the baseball bat she had brought from home. The attic remained the same, boxes, blankets, the nest, but the spoon had vanished. So had the shoe. The papers had been rifled through as if someone had disturbed them. Sarah tried to convince her to call the police, but Emma wavered. It might be nothing, after all. She might have only thought she heard it. But then there was the letter, and then there was the nest. Someone or something had been in her house. Climbing down the ladder, she noticed one thing in particular, the faint smudge on the edge of the trapdoor, as if the fingernail had caught in the wood. They shut the trapdoor and called the police, who promised to send someone in the afternoon. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling she weren't alone. Her home, her refuge, now felt like imprisonment. And somewhere overhead, in the blackness, waited. Watched. A little after noon, the officers arrived, two sharp uniformed officers who seemed considerably more inquisitive than shocked. She handed them the letter, her hands still shaking, recounted the events from the previous night, the attic, the nest, the shoe and spoon missing. Officer Daniels, who had the skeptical crease in his eye, read the letter twice, then handed it to his colleague, Officer Nguyen. They nodded politely, but the skepticism radiated from them. Prank, they said. Kids, maybe. Or an irate neighbor. But they had promised to look in the attic. Emma guided them to the hall, her stomach tightening as she indicated the trapdoor. Sarah remained near her, holding onto the baseball bat, her gaze flicking anxiously towards the ceiling. Daniels pulled the cord, and the ladder came down with its familiar creak. The officers ascended, their flashlights slicing into the darkness above. Time dragged, 1 minute forming into the next. She listened to the faraway muffled voices of the officers, the creak of the groaning floorboards, the scraping of boxes being moved around. Then Daniels yelled back, his voice curt. "Garbage in here!" No indication anyone is living in the apartment. Emma frowned. What about the blanket? The nest? One's face appeared in the trapdoor. There is a stack of blankets, yes, but it is all old material. No shoe, no spoon. Nobody seems to have been upstairs in ages. Emma climbed the stairs in spite of Sarah's protests, then peered into the attic. The nest remained, but it seemed different now, less purposeful, less deliberate accumulation. The papers were removed, the dent in the trapdoor barely perceptible. Had she imagined the whole thing? No, she had seen the shoe, the spoon, the torn piece of cloth. She was not losing her mind. They descended, drying their hands against the door. We will report it, Daniel said. But in all honesty, we can do little without proof. Lock the doors, install security systems or security cameras. Gwyn handed her one of their cards with their details and sympathetic smile. They departed, leaving Emma and Sarah alone in the still house. Sarah stayed with Emma the rest of the afternoon, rummaging through the attic with her. They tore open boxes, waded through blankets, and investigated every corner. There was nothing. No spoon, no shoe, no documents. The attic looked even emptier than it had the first time, as if it had held all its secrets in reserve. Sarah asked her to stay over with her a few nights, but she refused. It was her house. She would not let a letter and an uneasy feeling run her off. That night, she placed one of the motion-activated cameras from the clearance bin in the hallway, its red eye blinking every now and then. She padlocked all the windows and doors, then dragged her dresser in to block the trapdoor leading to the attic as an extra precaution. Sleep would have to wait. She settled into the couch, broom across her lap, watching the camera feed from her phone. The hallway stretched out desolate in front of her, but she couldn't shake the sense she was being observed. The sound of the alarm from the cam rang at 2:17 a.m. There was a pounding in her heart as she opened the footage. The hallway remained vacant, but the trapdoor had somehow opened, the ladder halfway extended. The dresser didn't budge. She had caught her breath in her throat. She crept back in with the broom, phone in hand, shaking. The trapdoor had shut, the way she had shut it. The ladder was back in the hole. The cam had malfunctioned. She replayed it all again. The trapdoor opening, the dropping ladder, then shutting in an instant. No one appeared. No shadow moved. It couldn't happen. She rewound it, frame by frame, her skin crawling. On one frame, barely perceptible, an indistinct shape quivered next to the trapdoor, a white, elongated hand, fingers curled into claws. It disappeared. Emma lost her balance and fell onto the ground, phone in hand. She must call Sarah, the police, someone, but she couldn't utter a word. The house was still, but it felt odd, the air too thick, too stagnant. She forced herself to stand up and examine the camera again. The battery had died, even though she charged it that morning. Struggling to understand, she shone her flashlight upwards and pushed the dressing table aside. The attic was, as the officers had said, vacant, but the air cooler, denser. Her beam landed on something she had missed in the initial brief look at the space. The faint outline of something in the floor, chalky, half obliterated. It consisted of a circle, with odd, irregular symbols carved in the center. She didn't understand them, but she felt the tightness in her chest, as if she shouldn't have seen them. She took a step back, her heels snagging in the creaking board. It moved, exposing a shallow hollow beneath. There was only one photograph in it, creased, worn. It was her house, from the other side of the street, but the windows were all the wrong shape, dark, nearly black, as if light were sucked into them. The indistinct form in the attic window had its face hidden, its form too long, too gaunt. Emma dropped the photo, her hands shaking. She fell back down the ladder, slamming the trapdoor shut. She didn't even graze the dresser. She grabbed her keys, phone, and took off running towards her car, speeding towards Sarah's in a frantic dash, never even glancing back. The house loomed in the back of her rearview window with black windows watching back. Sarah let her in, eyes open wide with alarm, and Emma told her everything: the camera, the hand, the symbols, the photo. Sarah didn't say she doubted her. She made tea, asked her onto the couch, and promised they'd figure it out in the morning. But Emma couldn't relax. She couldn't keep the image of that figure in the window out of her head, its impossible height, its faceless gaze. In the cushions of Sarah's couch, the note taunted her with its words. "You sleep soundly." She hadn't the night before, and she wouldn't tonight. Huddled in the shadows in her own dwelling, something waited. And it knew she had glimpsed it. Emma didn't go back to her home for 2 days. Sarah's apartment, with its bright lights and stale hum of city sound, was her haven. The letter, the attic, the photograph, they stalked her, taunting her, in her brain like ghosts. She carried the letter, folded in the back pocket of her jeans, its words a stubborn burden. Sarah, the pragmatist, had them look into the house. "Old houses always have histories," she said. "There could be something about yours." They started in the library, reading the books about the history of the town. Emma's house dated back to the early days as one of the oldest homes on Maple Street, built in 1924 by carpenter Elias Hawthorne. The files were meager, but they did yield one blurry newspaper clipping from the year 1927. It read about a disappearance. Elias, the reclusive carpenter, vanished without explanation. His wife said he'd been taken in by the house, but the police had dismissed her as mental imbalance, the article said. The article talked about the strange noises the neighbors had reported, scraping, thumping, as if something inside the walls was moving. They uncovered more papers. The house had changed hands many times, hardly remaining with an owner for over a few years. In 1953, a tenant had reported shadows moving wrong in the attic. In 1978, another had reported the trapdoor in the floor opening by itself every night. None of them had stayed long. The previous owner, prior to Emma, had also abruptly left in 2019, leaving behind furniture and clothing. The realtor hadn't disclosed all this to Emma when she purchased the house last year. Sarah suggested calling in the services of Margaret Voss, the local historian who specialized in the history of the old homes in the town. Margaret had a spare build, with sharp eyes hidden behind thick glasses. They invited her to meet them in a coffee house. She read their letter, then toured the attic, the nest, the symbols. "Your house," she said, "has history to it. I was warned about Elias by her. She said he was obsessed with the occult. He'd drawn out symbols in the beams in the house as protection spells. His wife had torched all but one of his notebooks after he disappeared, but it was said he'd been working on something which tethered him to the house. They don't say it is haunted," Margaret said to me. "Not exactly, but occupied." Emma's throat contracted. "Busy with what?" Margaret shrugged. "No one knows. They just speculate about the attic. Movement. Noises at night. Shadows." She stopped, her eyes forthright. "If you're smart, you'll keep away." Emma attempted to dismiss it as superstition, but the letter, the photograph, the security footage, they were all real. Emma and Sarah returned to the library in search of anything about Elias or the symbols. They found an old encyclopedia about local folklore, buried in the back stacks, with an entry regarding threshold entities. It described beings in threshold places, attics, basements, crawl spaces, that weren't human or spirit but were drawn to places where rituals had taken place. The symbols in the attic looked like drawings in the book, jagged, Spiral patterns used to bind something to a location. That evening, Emma dreamed. She climbed the ladder to the attic, but it continued endlessly, the trapdoor always in front, always beyond her grasp. There was the sound behind, the scratching sound, the sound of fingernails against wood. She woke suddenly, Sarah shaking her shoulder. "You were muttering about the attic," said Sarah, her face pale. Emma couldn't resist. She had to know. They returned the next day with flashlights, a crowbar, and a salt shaker, Sarah's idea, from the book about folklore. The house seemed different, colder, as if it didn't welcome them back. The hall cam still didn't work, its lens plugged with dust. They climbed to the attic, the creaking ladder beneath them. The air inside the attic was damp and rotting, the smell of old wood. The nest had disappeared, but the chalk circle remained, the symbols stronger, even throbbing under the beam from the flashlight. Emma knelt to trace her finger over the lines. They were warm, inexplicably so, as if the floor were breathing. Sarah removed the loose board close to the circle with the crowbar. There, below it, lay a small cloth-wrapped object. Emma opened it, shaking. There, inside, lay a single strand of hair, twine bound around it, and a slip of paper with the word written only. "Stay." The handwriting matched the letter. Then there came the sound from the far corner, a soft, deliberative shuffle. Emma's beam pierced the attic, illuminating the flash of motion against the edge of the mirror. The same broken mirror she had seen the first time she came, but now it showed the unthinkable, the outline of a gaunt, twisted form, the arms and legs distorted in impossible positions, the face a blot of darkness. Sarah grasped her arm with strength and dragged her to the ladder. They fell over in the darkness, slamming the trapdoor shut. There was time to throw salt across the threshold as she shook with fear, hoping it would work. They sprinted into the night air, the house looming after them like a monster. Emma held the package in the back seat, the words "stay" etched in her memory. She didn't have the faintest idea what it said, but one fact remained certain: whatever was in her house wasn't human. It wasn't leaving either. Emma didn't sleep for days. She stayed with Sarah, the package from the attic hidden in her backpack, its existence constantly reminding her of the house. She couldn't shake the image from the mirror from her brain, its contorted limbs and faceless face. Every groan in Sarah's apartment, every moving shadow in the corner, had her shivering. She felt as if she were being watched, even there, away from Maple Street. Sarah instructed her to sell the house, leave, and never return. She couldn't do it, though. The house belonged to her, her own real home after all those micro-unit years. Something in the letter, in the words "stay," felt like it was issuing a challenge. Whatever in her attic had chosen her. She had to understand why. They returned to the library, scouring further records. They found the wife's diary entry of Elias Hawthorne, preserved in the local archive. It recorded his final days, days spent in the attic, cutting symbols, muttering about keeping it bound. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, his eyes brimming with terror. The final entry, written the day he vanished, said, "It's no longer mine. It is the house's." Emma's blood ran cold. The symbols, the circle, the bundle, it had all been the work of Elias, work he'd had to leave unfinished. She called Margaret Voss again, who said she'd join them at the house. "If you're going back," Margaret said, "then you need to be ready." She appeared with a bag full of supplies: salt, sage, small iron knife. "These will kill it," she said, "but perhaps slow it." The house felt different as soon as they arrived. The air was thick, the windows dark even in the middle of the day. The trapdoor was closed, the dresser still in its way, but the spilled salt had been disturbed, as if it had had to navigate through it. Margaret scattered new salt in the hallway, her fists clenched but her face pale. It is stronger now, she said. It is able to sense the fact that you're fighting it. They climbed to the attic, Margaret in the lead. The circle had been erased where the chalk had lain, the floorboards as bare as if it had been swept. The air, while charged, felt heavy, almost choking, and the corner mirror seemed to hum with soft light. Margaret lit the sage, the smoke curling upwards, and began to chant in a low, incoherent voice. The attic grew colder, the shadows deepening. Emma's flashlight flickered, then died. Sarah let out a scream, pointing toward the mirror. The apparition appeared again, brighter now, tall, gaunt, limbs bent in impossible positions, its head crooked at an odd angle. It did not twitch, yet it loomed in the space, pressing against the center of Emma's breast. Margaret's incantations grew stronger, her shaking voice. "Show yourself!" she shouted, her face red with rage rather than fear. "This is my house!" The object in the mirror shifted, the head jerking in her direction. The mirror shattered, one splintered edge crackling across its surface. The attic reverberated with the sound, a harsh, guttural growl, the voice contorting to form words. The legs beneath her shook, but she didn't drop, fingers holding the metal blade Margaret had given her. Margaret flung salt over the mirror, the form dissolving, the hum ceasing suddenly. The attic, however, didn't feel vacant. The air vibrated, as if someone had run their finger across the strings of a violin. Sarah took Emma's elbow, pulling firmly. "We have to leave. Now." They descended from the ladder, Margaret in the rear, continuing to chant. Upon reaching the hall, the trapdoor slammed loudly shut, the sound echoing through the house. Emma's heart pounded in her breast. She longed to escape, but Margaret restrained her. "You can't leave it so," she said. "A letter, the package, it belongs to you now." Emma felt nauseous. "What is it after?" Margaret's eyes were solemn. "To stay. It has stayed here since Elias. Maybe even before. The rituals, the symbols, they keep it in place, but keep it in a state of vulnerability. If the connection is broken, it might leave. Maybe it will strengthen." They sat in the living room, in the circle of salt. Additional sage was lit by Margaret, the air thick with the faint, bitter smell of her incantation. The bundle, the lock of hair, the words "stay," were seared into her memory. She had no idea to whom it belonged, hers, Elias's, or someone else's. They returned to the attic at dawn. The corner where the mirror had lain was vacant now, the wall stripped. The air remained disturbed, as if the house held its breath. Margaret carved a new symbol into the floorboards, a harsh cross, one to sever ties. She told Emma to burn the package, to sever the tie. Emma hesitated, the package clenched in her hands. When she lit the match, the walls emitted sound, a slow, deliberative scraping, as if something was attempting to tear its way from them. The match burst into flame, and the package caught fire, the fumes curling upwards in sharp, looping tendrils. The scraping stopped, but the hushed silence remained. Margaret went white. "It is not gone," she whispered. "It is angry." Home was no longer hers. It had not been since the letter, or even sooner. The air pulsed with vitality, against the skin, after every step she took. The creaks in the walls stopped after she incinerated the package, but the silence hung heavier, stifling. Margaret remained, the sachet of sage and salt dwindling, the chanting rough in her throat. Sarah would stay close to Emma, although her hands shook every time they went past the hallway. Margaret explained the ritual binding. The symbols Elias had created, the circle in the attic, they had been to trap the entity as well as to bind it to the house, put it into dormancy. They had destroyed the equilibrium with the burning of the bundle, awakened it to consciousness. "We have to bind it again," Margaret said, "or it will follow you." It has marked you. Emma's chest tightened. The letter's words now became a curse. You sleep soundly. She had not at all let herself sleep, ever since the initial night. She had always had the nightmares with the creature in the mirror, its contorted limbs reaching to enfold her, its blank face pulling her into the blackness. They took over the living room, shuffling the furniture against the walls to form an open circle. Margaret inscribed the new circle with sharp lines, marked with glyphs from the mythology book. She drove the iron spikes into the cardinal locations, mumbling brief prayers into the metal tips. Emma and Sarah fetched and returned with items from all parts of the house. A candle or two, the small mirror, the slender piece of wood from the floor in the attic. It requires an item from the house, she said. Something it would be bound to. The ceremony began at midnight. Margaret lit the flames, the fire crackling in spite of the stagnant air. She spoke, her voice hard but tense, as the circle maintained space, the wood and mirror in their hands. The house creaked, the beams groaning in objection. The air began to chill, the mist from Emma's breath and the light from the candles. There had been a sound in the hallway, a slow, measured thud, as if someone had stepped. Another. Sarah caught at Emma's elbow, her fingernails biting into Emma's skin. Margaret did not stop the chanting, but her eyes flashed towards the door. The knocks grew louder, closer, then stopped in front of the door. Emma's heart pounded. She looked into the mirror in her hands, its surface black, reflecting only the flames from the candles. Then it changed. The shape appeared, its contorted face filling the glass. Its arms had lengthened now, stretching beyond the borders of the mirror, its head tilted to one side as if listening. Emma shook in fear, but she held the mirror firmly, Margaret's words echoing in her mind. Don't look away. Don't break the circle. The air grew thick, the flames of the candles wildly dancing. The creature moved, contorting its limbs backward, slithering from the mirror as from the haze of the smoke. It was in the room now, the darkness taking form, its essence smothering. Sarah whimpered, but Emma steeled herself, the wood from the attic in the other hand. Margaret shouted back in anger, her voice breaking. She hurled salt at the creature, which recoiled, blurring like a bad signal. Say its name, she shouted. Bind it. Emma had no clue what its name was. She had no clue what it was. But the word from the package, stay, was etched in her memory. Stay, she yelled, shattering her voice. You belong in the house. The creature stiffened, the face contorting towards her. For one moment, she glimpsed its face, a void, no face, whirlpool of shadow which seemed to suck her in. The fires died as the candles guttered, the room plunged into darkness. Sarah shrieked, and the glass in the mirror exploded in her hands, cutting into her palms. Then silence. The air lightened as the pressure eased. Margaret lit a candle with shaking hands. The figure had vanished. The circle remained whole, the nails still in position. The wood from the attic had reduced to ash in her palm. Bound, she breathed. Not permanently, at least. They didn't stay in the house. Emma carried a shopping bag, and they drove to Sarah's, the night dragging on interminably through them. She said she would be back, she would reinforce the binding, but she said to Emma it was done. It's part of the house, she said. As long as it remains standing, it does. Emma didn't go back. She sold it long distance, letting the realtor handle all the work. The new buyers were young newlyweds, exuberant, unaware of the secrets in the attic. Emma didn't warn them. She couldn't. The words wouldn't form. Months passed, then she received a package. No letter, no one to send it from. Inside, she discovered one photograph. Her house, windows darkened, the light in the attic. In the far corner, in crude handwriting, one word: stay. She torched the photograph, but the house remained with her. She climbed the stairs in her nightmares, the attic going on endlessly, the form looming in the darkness. She woke nightly to the faint scratching sound, barely loud enough to be heard but unmistakable, coming from above. The Shadow Twin. The old house creaked under the weight of a late October storm, its walls trembling as wind howled through the pines outside. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor, surrounded by dusty cardboard boxes, their edges softened by years of neglect. My parents had asked me to sort through the clutter before we moved, a task I'd put off for weeks. The air smelled of mildew and forgotten things, and the single bulb overhead flickered, casting long shadows across the wooden beams. I was alone, or so I thought. My fingers brushed against a leather-bound photo album, its cover cracked and peeling. I tugged it free from a box labeled Memories, the words scrawled in my mother's careful handwriting. The album felt heavier than it should, as if it carried more than just pictures. I opened it, expecting faded snapshots of family vacations or birthday parties, but the first photo stopped me cold. It was me, standing in the backyard at maybe 6 years old, grinning with a gap-toothed smile. I wore a red jacket, my hair a messy tangle from playing in the wind. But next to me stood another boy, identical in every way, same jacket, same smile, same hazel eyes glinting in the sunlight. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't have a twin. My brother, born alongside me, had died hours after our birth. My parents rarely spoke of him, and when they did, their voices grew heavy with grief. His name was Eli, and he was gone before I could know him. Yet there he was in the photo, clear as day, his hand resting on my shoulder. I flipped to the next page, my pulse quickening. Another picture, the two of us at a park, swinging side by side, our legs kicking in unison. Another, us blowing out candles on a shared birthday cake, our cheeks puffed out, eyes sparkling with mischief. My stomach twisted. These weren't memories I had. I'd grown up alone, an only child, the sole survivor of a birth that had taken my brother. I slammed the album shut, my hands trembling. The attic felt smaller, the air thicker. The bulb flickered again, and for a moment I thought I heard a soft laugh, like a child's, echoing from the far corner. I spun around, but there was nothing, just boxes and shadows. My heart pounded as I grabbed the album and hurried downstairs, the wooden steps groaning under my feet. In the kitchen, my mother was chopping carrots, the rhythmic thud of the knife steady and familiar. "Mom," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "What is this?" I held up the album, open to the first photo of me and the boy who couldn't exist. Her knife paused mid-chop. She turned, her eyes widening as they landed on the picture. For a moment she said nothing, her face pale. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "In the attic." "Who's the boy next to me?" "He looks exactly like me." She set the knife down, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "That's you, Ethan. Just you." Her words were too quick, her eyes darting to the side. "There's two of us, Mom. Look." I jabbed a finger at the photo. "I don't have a twin. Eli died. So who is this?" She swallowed hard, her hands twisting the towel. "It's just a trick of the light, sweetheart. Old cameras, they do funny things sometimes. Double exposures, you know?" She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I didn't believe her. The photos were too clear, too deliberate. That night I couldn't sleep. The album sat on my desk, its presence like a weight pressing against my chest. Around midnight I heard a creak outside my bedroom door, slow and deliberate, like someone testing the floorboards. I held my breath, listening. The sound stopped, but the air felt charged, as if someone were standing just beyond the door, waiting. The next morning, I went back to the attic, determined to find answers. I tore through more boxes, pulling out letters, trinkets, and more photos. In every picture from my childhood, the other boy was there, sometimes beside me, sometimes lingering in the background, his eyes always fixed on me. In one, taken at a school play, he stood at the edge of the stage, half hidden by the curtain, while I recited lines in a pirate costume. I remembered that night. I'd felt watched, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, but I chalked it up to stage fright. I found a journal tucked beneath a pile of old clothes, its pages yellowed and brittle. It was my father's, filled with his tight, slanted handwriting. Most entries were mundane, grocery lists, car repairs, but one, dated a week after my 5th birthday, made my blood run cold. "Ethan's been talking to himself again," it read. "He says he's playing with the other boy. We thought it was an imaginary friend, but he describes him so clearly, same clothes, same face. It's like he's describing Eli. I don't know what to think. Sarah says it's normal, but I'm not so sure." I dropped the journal, my hands shaking. The attic was silent, but the silence felt alive, like it was holding its breath. I grabbed the album and journal and ran downstairs, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the empty house. My parents were at work, and the quiet pressed against me, heavy and suffocating. I spread the photos across the kitchen table, studying each one. The boy's smile never changed, wide, almost too wide, like he knew something I didn't. That evening, my parents came home, and I confronted them. "You knew," I said, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "You knew about him. Why didn't you tell me?" My father's face crumpled, and my mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "It's not what you think," my father said. "After Eli, after we lost him, you started talking about a boy who looked like you. We thought you were coping, imagining him to fill the gap. But the photos..." He trailed off, his eyes fixed on the album. "What about the photos?" I pressed. My mother's voice was barely audible. "We didn't see him at first. Not in the pictures. Not until you started pointing him out." The room spun. "What do you mean you didn't see him?" My father rubbed his face, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "The first time you showed us a photo with him, we thought you were joking. But then we looked closer, and he was there. In every picture. We don't know how. We don't know why." A chill ran through me. "Is he... Eli?" My parents exchanged a glance, and for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. "We don't know," my mother whispered. "But sometimes, at night, I hear 2 sets of footsteps in your room." That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, the album clutched to my chest, listening for those footsteps. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, a soft creak, then another, circling my bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart hammering. When I opened them, the room was empty, but the air felt wrong, like it was watching me. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shadow on the wall, shaped like me, but not me. It stood still, its head tilted, as if waiting for me to move first. The shadow on my bedroom wall didn't move, but it felt alive, its edges sharp against the dim glow of my nightlight. I lay frozen, clutching the photo album, my breath shallow as I stared at the silhouette that mirrored my own. It wasn't just a trick of the light, it couldn't be. The shape was too precise, too deliberate, its head tilted at an angle that sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to move, pinned by the weight of its presence. The air grew colder, and a faint whisper brushed against my ear, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It wasn't words, not exactly, but it carried a feeling, lonely, hungry, and impossibly familiar. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to go away, but the whisper grew louder, circling me like a predator. When I opened my eyes, the shadow was gone, but the room felt smaller, as if the walls had crept closer while I wasn't looking. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, my eyes burned, and my hands ached from gripping the album. I stumbled downstairs, the house too quiet without my parents' usual morning chatter. They'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to the store. Back by noon. The clock read 7:14 a.m. I had hours alone, and the thought made my skin crawl. The photos were still spread across the table, the boy's face staring up at me from every angle. I avoided looking at them, but I could feel his eyes, unblinking, following me as I poured cereal I had no appetite for. I needed answers, something concrete to explain the impossible. I grabbed my father's journal from the pile and flipped through it, searching for more entries about the other boy. Most pages were mundane, but one, dated 2 years after the first, stopped me. Ethan's teacher called today, my father had written. She said he's been drawing pictures of himself with another boy, always together, always identical. She asked if he had a brother. I didn't know what to say. He's been so quiet lately, staring at corners like he sees something we don't. Sarah wants to take him to a doctor, but what do I say? That our son sees his dead twin? My cereal sat untouched, the milk turning soggy. The house creaked, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times, but now it felt deliberate, like footsteps pacing above me. I glanced at the ceiling, half expecting to see the shadow again, but there was nothing. Just the house, old and tired, holding its secrets. I turned back to the journal, my fingers trembling as I read another entry, this one from my 7th birthday. Ethan asked why we never talk about Eli. He said he sees him sometimes, standing in the backyard at night. I checked the yard myself. Nothing there. But I swear I felt something watching me from the trees. I slammed the journal shut, my heart racing. The backyard. I hadn't thought about it in years, but now a memory surfaced, sharp and vivid. I was 6, maybe 7, playing alone in the grass when I'd felt it. A prickling sensation, like eyes boring into my back. I'd turned, expecting to see my mother calling me inside, but instead, I saw a boy standing by the oak tree, his red jacket identical to mine. He hadn't moved, just stared, his smile too wide, his eyes too bright. I'd run inside crying, and my parents had dismissed it as a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was him. I pushed the journal away and grabbed my phone, scrolling through old family photos I'd digitized last summer. I hadn't noticed it then, but now I saw him in every one, standing just behind me at the zoo, sitting at the edge of a picnic table, his face half hidden by a balloon at a fair. My hand shook as I zoomed in, his features so like mine it was like looking in a mirror. But there was something wrong with his eyes, something empty, like they were borrowing my face but not my soul. The house creaked again, louder this time, and I jumped, dropping my phone. The sound came from the hallway, slow and rhythmic, like someone dragging their feet. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor, and called out, "Mom? Dad?" No answer. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. I grabbed a kitchen knife, its weight cold and reassuring in my hand, and crept toward the hallway. The light flickered, casting jagged shadows across the walls. I peered around the corner, the knife trembling in my grip. The hallway was empty, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then I heard it again, the whisper, soft and insistent, coming from the staircase. It wasn't words, but it felt like a question, like it was asking me to follow. Against every instinct, I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. At the top, the attic door was ajar, though I was sure I'd closed it. The whisper grew louder, weaving through the air like a thread pulling me forward. I pushed the door open, the knife raised, and stepped into the attic. The bulb was off, the room swallowed by darkness, but I could feel him there, waiting. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers brushing against something cold and soft, like a hand. I yanked my arm back, my heart pounding, and flipped the switch. The bulb flared to life, revealing nothing but boxes and dust. But the air was wrong, thick with the scent of something metallic, like old coins. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I spun around, the knife slipping from my sweaty grip, and saw it, a shadow on the wall, tall and thin, its head tilted just like before. It moved, sliding across the beams, and the whisper became a voice, low and clear, saying my name. Ethan! I screamed, backing into a stack of boxes that toppled over, spilling photos and papers across the floor. The shadow loomed closer, its edges sharpening into a shape that was unmistakably me. I scrambled for the door, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The voice came again, closer now, right behind me. You left me, it said, and I felt a cold breath on my neck. I turned, my back against the door, and saw nothing but the shadow, now stretching across the ceiling, its arms reaching toward me. The light flickered, and for a split second, I saw his face, my face, smiling that too-wide smile. Then the bulb shattered, plunging the attic into darkness. Darkness swallowed the attic, the shattered bulb leaving only the faint glow of moonlight seeping through a cracked window. My back pressed against the locked door, the cold wood grounding me as my heart hammered in my chest. The shadow was gone, but its presence lingered, heavy and oppressive, like a weight on my lungs. The voice, my voice, but not mine, had stopped, but the silence was worse, thick with anticipation. I fumbled for the door handle again, my hands slick with sweat, and this time, it turned. I stumbled into a hallway, gasping, and slammed the door shut behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached the bathroom, locking the door and flipping on the light. The mirror above the sink reflected my pale, wide-eyed face, my hair damp with sweat. I gripped the counter, trying to steady my breathing, but my reflection felt wrong, like it was watching me too closely. I leaned closer, searching for something, anything, to prove I was alone. But then my reflection blinked when I didn't. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the towel rack. My reflection stayed still, its lips curling into that familiar, too-wide smile. "Stop it," I whispered, my voice shaking. The reflection tilted its head, mimicking the shadow's unnatural angle, and raised a hand, pressing it against the inside of the mirror. I froze, my own hand twitching at my side, but I hadn't moved. The glass rippled, like water disturbed by a stone, and the hand pushed through, fingers pale and cold, reaching for me. I bolted from the bathroom, my bare feet slipping on the hardwood floor. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that hides something waiting to pounce. I ran to the kitchen, where the photos still lay scattered across the table. My parents' notes said they'd be back by noon, but the clock read 11:58, and I couldn't wait. I needed to understand what was happening, why this boy, this thing, was in my life, my photos, my reflection. I grabbed my father's journal again, flipping to a later entry, my hands trembling so badly the pages tore. "Ethan, stop talking about the other boy. My father had written when I was 9. But I found drawings under his bed, dozens of them, all of the same face, his face, but with empty eyes. He says he doesn't remember drawing them. Last night, I woke up to footsteps in the attic. I checked, but no one was there. Just a cold spot by the window, like someone had been standing there for hours." I dropped the journal, my eyes darting to the ceiling. The attic was directly above me. I grabbed the kitchen knife again, its blade glinting under the fluorescent light, and forced myself to climb the stairs. Every step felt like wading through water, my legs heavy with dread. The attic door was closed, but a faint scratching came from behind it, like nails dragging across wood. I gripped the knife tighter, my knuckles white, and pushed the door open. The attic was empty, the broken bulb leaving the room in shadows. Moonlight filtered through the window, casting a pale glow over the scattered boxes and photos. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low hum, like a voice trying to form words. I stepped forward, the floorboards creaking, and saw something glinting in the corner, a small, tarnished mirror I hadn't noticed before, propped against the box. Its frame was ornate, carved with strange, twisting shapes that seemed to move in the dim light. I approached it, drawn despite myself. My reflection appeared, but it wasn't right. The boy in the mirror wore my clothes, my face, but his eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep, like wells with no bottom. He smiled, and I felt a tug, like something pulling at my insides. "You left me," he said, his voice clear now, echoing in my skull. "You got to live." I stumbled back, the knife clattering to the floor. "You're not real," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You're not Eli." The reflection laughed, a sound that grated against my bones. "Eli? Is that what they told you?" The mirror rippled again, and his hand reached out, faster this time, grabbing my wrist. His touch was ice, burning cold, and I screamed, yanking my arm back. The mirror shattered, glass spraying across the floor, but his laughter didn't stop. It echoed from the walls, the ceiling, the shadows. I ran, tripping over boxes, and burst out of the attic, slamming the door behind me. Downstairs, the front door rattled, my parents finally home. I stumbled into the kitchen, my wrist still stinging where the reflection had touched me. My mother dropped her grocery bags, her face paling as she saw me. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she asked, rushing forward. "He's here," I gasped. "In the photos, the mirror, he grabbed me." My father's eyes widened, and he exchanged a look with my mother. "We need to tell him," he said quietly. "Tell me what?" I demanded, my voice breaking. My mother sat me down, her hands trembling as she clasped mine. "When you were born," she said, "Eli he didn't die right away. He lived for a few days. The doctors said he was fine, but then..." She paused, tears welling in her eyes. "He changed. He'd stare at you, Ethan, like he wanted something. And then he was gone. The doctors couldn't explain it." My father took over, his voice low. "After he died, you started talking about him, like he was still here. We thought it was grief, but then the photos started showing someone else. We tried to ignore it, to protect you. But he's never left, has he?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "He's upstairs. In the attic." He spoke to me. My parents went pale, and for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, raw and unguarded. The house creaked again, louder, like a heartbeat. And then, from the hallway, came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and exactly like mine. The footsteps in the hallway stopped, leaving a silence that pressed against my ears like water. My parents froze, their eyes locked on the doorway, where the light flickered as if something had passed through it. I gripped the kitchen table, my knuckles white, the memory of the cold hand from the mirror still burning my wrist. My mother whispered my name, her voice trembling, but I couldn't look at her. The air felt alive, thick with something watching, waiting. "Stay here," my father said, his voice low but firm. He grabbed a flashlight from a drawer and moved toward the hallway, his shoulders squared like he was bracing for a fight. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away, my eyes fixed on the empty doorway. The footsteps started again, fainter now, moving upstairs toward the attic. "We can't stay here," I said, standing so fast my chair tipped over. "He's up there. He's always been up there." My mother's face crumpled. "Ethan, please. We don't know what this is. Maybe it's just—" "It's not just anything," I snapped, my voice louder than I meant. "He's in the photos, the mirror, the shadows. He's real, and he's angry." I didn't know how I knew that, but I felt it, a deep, gnawing certainty that whatever this thing was, it wanted something from me, something I wasn't sure I could give. My father returned, his face pale, the flashlight trembling in his hand. "The attic door's open again," he said. "I closed it this morning." I know I did. I didn't wait for them to decide what to do. I grabbed the knife from the table and headed for the stairs, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. My parents called after me, but their voices faded as I climbed, each step pulling me closer to the attic. The air grew colder with every step, the house creaking like it was trying to warn me. At the top, the attic door stood wide open, a black rectangle swallowing the light. I stepped inside, the knife raised, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The broken mirror lay in pieces on the floor, its shards glinting like teeth. The photos from the spilled boxes were scattered everywhere, and in every one, the boy's face stared back at me, his smile sharper now, almost mocking. I knelt, picking up a photo of us at a lake, our reflections blurred in the water. But in the picture, his reflection was clearer than mine, his eyes darker, his smile wider. "You shouldn't be here," a voice said, soft and close, like it was whispered in my ear. I spun around, the flashlight beam darting across the attic, but no one was there. The air shifted, and the photos on the floor rustled, as if moved by an unseen hand. I backed toward the door, my breath hitching, when the flashlight flickered and died. Darkness closed in, and the voice came again, louder, from every direction. "You took my life." It was my voice, but twisted, like a recording played backward. I swung the knife blindly, the blade slicing through air, and stumbled over a box, falling to my knees. The floor was cold, unnaturally so, and I felt something brush against my back, light as a breath but heavy with intent. "Get away!" I shouted, scrambling to my feet. The door was still open, a faint glow from the hallway spilling in, and I ran for it, but the air thickened, pushing against me like a current. I fought through it, my lungs burning, and reached the hallway, slamming the door shut. The lock clicked, but I didn't trust it to hold. Downstairs, my parents were waiting, their faces ashen. "What happened?" my mother asked, her voice breaking. "He's not Eli," I said, my voice hoarse. "He's something else. He said I took his life." My father shook his head, his eyes haunted. "We should have told you everything. After Eli died, we started noticing things. Shadows in the house, always in pairs. Things moved, your toys, your clothes, like someone was playing with them. We thought it was you, but you were asleep. And then the photos started showing him." I sank into a chair, the knife still in my hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" "We were scared," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "We thought if we ignored it, it would go away. But it's gotten worse since you found the album." The house groaned, a deep, guttural sound that made the windows rattle. My father grabbed his phone, scrolling through contacts. "I'm calling Father Michael. He's helped with things like this before." I stared at him, stunned. "A priest? You think this is some kind of ghost?" "I don't know what it is," he said, his voice shaking. "But it's not my son." The wait for Father Michael was agonizing. Every creak, every flicker of light felt like a warning. I stayed in the kitchen, the knife on the table, the photos spread out like evidence. My mother kept glancing at the ceiling, as if expecting the attic to burst open. My father paced, muttering prayers under his breath. When Father Michael arrived, he was older than I'd expected, his face lined but calm, carrying a small bag that smelled of incense. He listened to our story, his eyes narrowing as he studied the photos. "This isn't a spirit," he said finally. "It's something else. Something that's latched onto you, Ethan. It's using your face, your life, to anchor itself here." "What does it want?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He looked at me, his eyes grave. "It wants what you have. Your life. Your place." That night, we stayed in the living room, the lights on, Father Michael's prayers filling the air. But the house felt alive, its walls pulsing with something unseen. And in the quiet moments I heard it again, the whisper, my name, coming from the shadows, closer now, hungrier. Father Michael's prayers filled the living room, his voice steady but strained, the words blending with the scent of burning incense. The lights blazed, casting harsh shadows across the furniture, but they did little to ease the chill that clung to the air. My parents sat close together on the couch, their hands clasped, their faces pale. I stood by the window, the knife still in my hand, watching the darkness outside for any sign of movement. The house groaned, its creaks sharper now, like it was protesting the priest's presence. "He's stronger than I expected," Father Michael said, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. He'd spread salt along the windowsills and doorways, a thin line that glistened in the light. "Whatever this is, it's tied to you, Ethan. It's been here since you were born, waiting." "Waiting for what?" I asked, my voice rough from hours of silence. He didn't answer right away, his eyes fixed on the photo album open on the coffee table. The boy's face stared up from every picture, his smile a taunt. "To take your place," he said finally. "It's not your brother. It's something older, something that saw an opening when Eli died. It's been feeding on your life, growing stronger." My mother sobbed, burying her face in my father's shoulder. I wanted to comfort her, but my own fear held me back. The whisper came again, faint but clear, slipping through the cracks in the priest's prayers. "Ethan," it said, and I felt it like a hook in my chest, pulling me toward the stairs. "Don't listen," Father Michael said sharply, grabbing my arm. "It wants you to engage with it. That's how it gets stronger." But it was too late. The air shifted, growing heavy, and the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness for a heartbeat before flaring back to life. The photo album slammed shut, the sound like a door closing, and the salt lines scattered, as if swept by an unseen hand. My mother screamed, and my father stood, his chair toppling. "Stay together!" Father Michael shouted, raising his cross. But the air was alive now, crackling with energy, and the whisper became a voice, loud and clear, echoing from every corner. "You can't keep me out," it said, and I saw it, a shadow on the wall, my shadow, but taller, its edges jagged, its head tilted at that unnatural angle. I backed toward the wall, the knife trembling in my hand. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice breaking. The shadow moved, sliding across the wall toward me, and the voice answered, "You." The room shook, the windows rattling, and the photos on the table lifted into the air, spinning like leaves in a storm. My parents clung to each other, and Father Michael shouted prayers, his voice hoarse. But the shadow didn't stop. It stretched toward me, its hand reaching out, cold and solid, wrapping around my wrist. I screamed, slashing with the knife, but it passed through nothing. The shadow laughed, a sound that clawed at my mind, and pulled me forward, toward the stairs. I fought, digging my heels into the floor, but it was stronger, its grip like iron. My parents called my name, but their voices faded as the shadow dragged me up the stairs, toward the attic. The door was open, the darkness inside absolute. The shadow released me, and I stumbled forward, catching myself on a box. The air was freezing, my breath visible in the moonlight. The broken mirror's shards glittered on the floor, reflecting pieces of my face, but not mine alone. His face was there too, smiling, his eyes black pits. "You can't run," he said, his voice inside my head now, burrowing deep. "I'm you. I've always been you." I turned to run, but the door slammed shut, the lock clicking. The photos on the floor rustled, and I saw them move, the boy stepping out of the pictures, his form solidifying, his face my face, but wrong. He walked toward me, his steps silent, his smile growing wider. "You lived," he said. "I didn't. It's not fair." "You're not Eli," I said, backing away, my voice shaking. "You're not my brother." He laughed, a sound that echoed in my bones. "Eli was weak. I took his place. And now I'll take yours." I lunged for the door, pounding on it, screaming for my parents. But the air grew heavier, pressing me down, and the boy was closer now, his hand reaching for my face. His touch was cold, draining, and I felt myself fading, my thoughts blurring. "Join me," he whispered, and I saw it, his life, my life, intertwined, two shadows in one body, fighting for control. With everything I had, I swung the knife, not at him but at the mirror shards, smashing them into smaller pieces. The boy screamed, a sound that shook the walls, and the air lightened, the pressure easing. I kept smashing, glass cutting my hands, until the shards were dust. The boy's form flickered, his face twisting in rage, and then he was gone, the attic silent. I collapsed, my hands bleeding, my body trembling. The door burst open, my parents and Father Michael rushing in. They pulled me out, down the stairs, away from the attic. The house was quiet now, the air normal, but I felt him still, a faint whisper in the back of my mind, waiting.